They were called the most wicked cities on earth, so corrupt, so far gone that according to the Bible, God chose to erase them from existence in a single catastrophic moment. Fire, sulfur, total destruction. This is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and welcome to episode 1 of Mysteries of the Bible, the series where we dig into the greatest unanswered questions of Scripture and history. Today, were these cities real? And if they were, where on earth did they actually stand? According to the book of Genesis, Sodom and Gomorrah were two cities in a fertile valley near the Dead Sea. The Bible describes this region as lush compared to the garden of the Lord. But the people of Sodom, the text says, had become so morally corrupt that their sin reached heaven itself. Two angels are sent to investigate, disguised as travelers, and are taken in by a man named Lot. That night, the men of the city surround Lot's house, demanding he hand over his guests. The angels blind the mob and warn Lot, "Get your family out now." The next morning, Lot and his family flee as fire and burning sulfur rain down from the sky. Lot's wife looks back at the destruction against the angel's warning and is turned into a pillar of salt. By the time the smoke clears, Genesis says, the entire plain has been wiped out. It's one of the most vivid destruction scenes in the Bible. But is there an actual location on Earth that matches this story? The first major theory points to the southern end of the Dead Sea in modern-day Jordan. One site, called edh-Dhra, has produced startling evidence. Excavations uncovered a massive cemetery, suggesting a large population once lived here. Around 2350 BC, the site shows signs of sudden catastrophic destruction. Layers of ash, collapsed walls, and burned human remains found directly on top of the ruins, meaning the destruction happened so fast the bodies weren't buried by later construction. Whatever happened at edh-Dhra happened quickly, violently, and the city was never rebuilt. The second theory points to el-Hammam in the Jordan Valley just north of the Dead Sea. In 2021, researchers proposed this city was destroyed by an airburst event, a meteor or comet fragment exploding in the atmosphere above the city, similar to the Tunguska event of 1908, but smaller and more localized. Their evidence included melted pottery, with surfaces reaching temperatures over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to instantly turn clay into glass. They also found shocked quartz, tiny structures that typically only form under extreme, instantaneous pressure, the kind linked to meteor impacts, not conventional fire. Soil samples showed elevated salt levels, consistent with a shockwave pulling material from the Dead Sea and spreading it across the farmland, rendering the ground infertile for centuries. Fire from the sky. Instant destruction. Salt spread across the land. Some researchers believe this matches Genesis a little too well to be coincidence. To be clear, this theory is controversial. Some researchers support it strongly. Others argue the destruction could be explained by warfare, earthquakes, or fires spreading through mud brick construction. The debate remains open, with research ongoing at both sites. There's also a geological angle. This region sits directly on the Dead Sea Transform, a major fault line where tectonic plates grind against each other, and the area is naturally rich in bitumen, sulfur, and underground gas pockets. Some geologists propose a strong earthquake here could have ignited underground gas and bitumen, creating exactly the fire and sulfur devastation the Bible describes. No meteor required. Even without the dramatic asteroid theory, the raw ingredients for this kind of disaster genuinely exist in this exact region. So where do scholars land? Some believe this was a real catastrophe, likely an earthquake, gas explosion, or airburst event, later reframed with religious meaning over generations, the same way ancient cultures across the world turned real disasters into legends. Others argue that while these cities were real and were absolutely destroyed, tying them specifically to Sodom and Gomorrah requires a leap the archaeological record can't fully confirm. And others treat the story primarily as theological literature, a moral parable about corruption and judgment, where exact geography matters less than the message. What makes this case unusual is that this isn't a story with zero evidence. edh-Dhra and el-Hammam were real cities, and they really were destroyed suddenly and violently, never rebuilt. The real question isn't whether something happened here, it's whether this is the same event the Bible describes, and how much of it survived generations of retelling before being written down. And the heart of why this series exists. Ancient texts are rarely simply true or simply false. They're often real memory, cultural meaning, and generations of retelling, layered onto something that actually happened. Sodom and Gomorrah might be exactly that. A genuine catastrophe remembered as a warning, eventually written down as one of the most dramatic destruction scenes in religious history. So what do you think really happened in that valley by the Dead Sea? An earthquake that ignited underground gas? A meteor exploding in the sky? Or is the deeper truth less about geology and more about what humanity has always needed these kinds of stories to mean? This has been episode 1 of Mysteries of the Bible. If you want to keep exploring the biggest unanswered questions in Scripture and history, subscribe and turn on notifications, because next episode we trace the true location of the Garden of Eden. See you there.